Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. Today is actually a very special episode for me, a very personal episode to me actually, because I'm really delighted to have my father-in-law, Dr. Derek Pryor, former Gartner analyst as well. And we'll find out in a second a bit more about his sort of background and career, but it's going to be a really interesting conversation. We're going to cover lots of topics around AI, sustainability, which is a big passion of Derek's, and many other things as well. But I guess before we go into that, Derek, it'd be great for you just to introduce yourself.
Oh, thanks, Niall. It's great. It's an honour. It's great, but it's also an honour to be on your podcast. So thank you so much for inviting me. Just maybe a quick whistle-stop resume of my career. I started life as a chemical engineer, and an engineer is that gave me good insight for the future. I got really upset as a young man reading about environmental pollution in the 70s. Therefore, I thought, well, what can I do? Not much was the answer, go on protest marches, but I did a PhD in air pollution minimisation, worked in process control companies, which was very, very interesting, controlling chemical plants and so forth. Moved over to the world of IT, actually, and spent 17 years with Hewlett-Packard. And boy, did I learn a lot there, Noel, because there was a different time. And Hewlett-Packard in the 90s was a genuine leader in two things, both looking after employees and taking care of them. And secondly, something you and I are both passionate about, is looking after the customer. So that was something they did really well. And then in '98, a little bit of direction change. I worked for Gartner Research as an SAP analyst, and it was wonderful. I went to conferences, spoke to thousands of SAP customers all over the world. They all had SAP, but guess what? They all had challenges. And so I found it quite easy to help them based on the previous experience, which somehow fitted in nicely. And in the last 10 years, I've been doing lots of research on sustainability, but more of that later.
Yeah, no, fantastic. When you said that something we were both passionate about, I thought you were going to say real ale to start with, but I realised that we're on a professional podcast. But no, so one thing just to pick out from that, actually, so you were sort of ahead of your time thinking about sustainability issues. I don't know how, was it common practice for people to think about sustainability all the way back then, or were you sort of a person on your own? Not on your own, but a minority?
The background really is, Niall, that when I worked for HP, I was able to apply my process control experience and to work on trying to bring together the world of engineering and the world of business. What I mean by that was, it seems so last century, but there was a buzzword, Niall, called SIM. Computer integrated manufacturing, which said, look, we've got all these computers, let's join them all up from the factory floor to the shop floor, to the boardroom floor, sorry. So that meant bridging the world of the factory floor and process control and sharing that real-time information with business leaders. Essentially, the board and the CEO wants to know, how efficient is the process? Why isn't it as efficient as we thought it was? Well, SIM aim to try and bridge the world of engineers that deal in real time, as you know, on the factory floor, keeping machines running safely and under control, with the world of MRP, manufacturing resource planning, or evolved into enterprise resource planning, which the board worry about because it tells them how much profit they're making. But you never guess what? What I found was quite surprising in that there was a culture gap between engineers that lived and breathed real time and had their own language and the world of IT, which was business driven. And that was pretty much dealing with purchase orders and cost codes, exciting things like that to you and I know, but they don't change quickly. Real-time data about machines changes within a matter of milliseconds. And do you know what? trying to get business people, in other words, IT people, to understand the world of engineers was just a huge challenge. So I've always found that trying to use technology to place it in the hands of business people has been a major issue.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, the culture gap. I mean, we often talk about, we're talking about predictive maintenance, about, the importance of cultural change. You've got to be ready for, the kind of cultural change that comes alongside the technology. But so how, over the years, how you said that, big challenges, sort of bringing those two together. Did you help companies overcome those challenges, I guess?
Well, first of all, what I tried to do was to make sure that IT people understood that you couldn't just apply IT speak and IT approaches to process control. Enterprise asset management is something which, believe it or not, IT and business worries about. But you would say, I'm sure, rightly, the engineers in the maintenance department, they're the ones that know how to maintain the assets. But there's such a big culture gap between people that worry about purchase orders for new equipment and those that have got to plan the maintenance schedules of incredibly complex machinery and keep them up and running. So that culture gap is very real, and so I always try to help people to understand that. The other thing I would point out, something which I'd learned, is that IT has become so much more exciting today, so much more powerful, but it's become so much more complex. And the takeaway I found working at Gartner was, because there's so much IT out there which you could choose to use, trying to figure out how all the moving parts fit together is really difficult. And the best way of doing that is to work with professionals in the world of IT called enterprise architects that understand the bigger picture, what's possible, what's easy, what's hard, and they need to help bridge this cultural gap too.
So in practice, how do you bring these very opposing, so it's IT/OT we're talking about really, but how do we bring these sort of maybe opposing is the wrong word, but bring these conflicting teams together, because they've both got, not conflicting in the sense of got different priorities and different things to think about, but how do you sort of get those two teams aligned, or groups of stakeholders aligned?
I think it comes down to some organisations are naturally more open than others, and they encourage the sort of dialogue that's needed. So some organisations don't, though, Niall. You've probably seen it. Some companies are very silo-driven. And if you're silo-driven, it's hard. It's very difficult to break down the walls of the silo. So probably the best way of doing that is to make sure that you have proper company-wide planning sessions to regularly review. Start with the business strategy. What is the business strategy? How do we all need to work together? Everybody's got a role to play in making the current business strategy work, and even moving on the business strategy to produce new products and services. But you can only make that happen, clearly, if you have the right people in the room, sitting around the table, understanding each other's problems and basically understanding each other's opportunities. And that means different language, but it's dialogue and having a strategy-driven approach. And a lot of the time it comes back to the CEO. The CEO needs to lead any change management that's needed to bring people together, to make them fully aware of the business strategy, and to get them on board and to get them fired up.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes a lot of sense as well. I get the other point of this as well. So it's interesting. We mentioned about technology. During your career, did you often see that new technologies would come along? At the moment it's AI and Gen AI, but these new technologies would come along and people would get very excited and say, we need to implement this fantastic technology, but the important point you mentioned was about there still has to be like a business case. There has to be a reason why, a challenge you're trying to solve. But did you often come across companies who are just very excited about the latest cool toy and they need it implemented. We want this now because it's so cool and techie and stuff. That sort of thing.
Do you know what? That's probably the number one problem with IT. Offers such golden opportunities. You read the articles and you think, wow, this is so powerful. We're going to get left behind as a company unless we get involved and do something here. Can we afford our competitors to be ahead of us? The answer is no. And going back to my Gartner days, we found time and time again, in fact, Gartner was guilty of writing articles saying, did you know you can do X, Y, Z with this latest technology? And the trouble is, what happens then is in the world of IT, all the vendors get on board and say, oh, we can do this. Me too. We see this today in the world of AI. All IT vendors, I challenge you to go to an IT vendor's website and not find their latest story on AI on there. It will be there. So at Gartner, one of the challenges we found time and time again of new technology was just, first of all, understanding how mature is it. So Gartner has something called the IT hype cycle, which shows that all technologies follow this path of evolution from exciting introduction through to when's the point you can actually realistically start using it? Unless, of course, you're an early adopter. Some organizations pride themselves on being an early adopter because they want to be a leader. So first of all, the challenge is understanding how mature is this? How mature are the products that the salespeople are knocking on the door today offering us? And then you have to take a step back and say, well, this is new. Has our organisation got the right skills in-house? And the answer is probably not. So you need to make sure you either recruit people that are expert or work with service providers and hope that their claims of expert are true. You start with a pilot project, you go up the learning curve, you spread the knowledge. And that was the typical sort of advice stream that we used to offer at Gartner.
And this approach around technology, so because there's been many sort of big technology accelerators. Let's take one example is the internet, and I won't reveal your age by knowing you'll know what the pre-internet age was about, of course. But my interest, because over such a long career, how everything you've described there, has that fundamentally changed over that period? When things like the internet came in and I guess changed everything, but has the attitude of sort of IT leaders changed from pre-internet days to post-internet, let's say?
Yes, they have. And what I think we've seen is acceleration. The time between the last exciting technology and today's exciting technology is decreasing all the time. The rate at which technology is being introduced to the marketplace now is both exciting and a huge challenge to the CIO. If you're the CIO, you're in the business of placing bets. You need to have, first of all, you need to have your enterprise architects in your team that you trust, that can ask the right difficult questions of anybody that claims that something new is definitely possible. Well, it may be possible, but are there any gotchas, and are there 2 or 3 different ways of doing it? The CIO has got this huge challenge of dealing with perpetual change. It's like being on a business conveyor belt. When new capabilities are coming on, they seem to be coming on faster than ever. If we think back to the internet, internet seemed to just provide us lots of information initially, but all of a sudden there were businesses we all know. We can all think of examples of businesses which became enabled by the internet. And so the same thing's going to happen with AI. There are things that we as humans do today that AI is going to be able to do for us, and it's going to change the way in which we work. So we've got to be able to deal with change, and that's an easy thing to say, but for most of us, that's quite difficult, really. Wouldn't you agree, Niall?
Well, exactly. Well, especially you can imagine if you've been working in a certain way for so long, and then all of a sudden, you've been told to work in a completely different way or with new tools. You can see why there's some resistance to that. I also wanted to touch upon the sort of deployment of technology. So, and particularly the challenges associated with deploying across like an enterprise. It's not just like a local deployment, but when, because you work, some big companies who are not just looking at just a local deployment of technology, they want it sort of global. So what sort of challenges sort of come with that?
The challenge, this is a really good one. I mean, going back to Gartner again for 1 second, I specialised in SAP, the market-leading enterprise resource planning vendor, and they were the major leader in ERP, and the capabilities of the software were pretty astounding, actually, to the point where, you'd start with a small project, but then quickly the CEO is going to say, okay, so you've streamlined the business order to cash process here in the UK. That's okay. Well done. Now your next challenge is, I want that global. And that is very, very difficult because of the language gap is one thing, but I don't think it's the biggest one. It's the fact that each country has its own history and its own proud traditions and its own culture and its own ways of doing things. Most countries don't really like being told how to do something. So if you're the CEO of a global company, the task of communication that we touched upon earlier to bridge the worlds of engineering and IT is one thing, but scaling that communication challenge across the world, that's really hard. And I think what I observed was there were some companies out there that had SAP that just seemed to be so far ahead of the others, Niall. I mean, there are companies like 3M, Procter & Gamble, that had a very open culture and just seemed to be able to do things way ahead of what other companies were. So there were leaders and there were followers, really. And global is really the challenge within business, which I think exposes the greatest challenge for the board to be able to handle.
And I'm just thinking the reasons for these differences. Because, like I say, from one company to another, you could have, completely different culture. Is there a reason behind it, or is it just simple that it depends who's in the leadership position at the time? Because I know leadership changes, doesn't it? And then that often brings in change in itself. But is there something you can put your finger on?
Yeah. I really feel that there is something going on here into this. This is a really important discussion we're having now, and it comes back to the heart of the company. Are they headquarter driven? Do they like to mandate how processes are run because the board can see they want one way of doing things, or do they encourage local autonomy? Some companies will say, we can't tell them what to do in Germany. They've got good people there. They've figured out a good local initiative, and it's different to what we see within our company in Spain. So some companies will say that's okay, as long as the people in Spain and Germany are each making a profit, that's okay. But for many companies, they will say that's okay, but it's not enough. We do need to recognise the fact that we've got global customers, and global customers want to have one way of doing business with you. So the culture of the company and how they choose to respond to just that one challenge is very insightful. Some companies will want to have one way of doing things. They still encourage openness and involvement. Others will just let people get on and do their own thing, and that's when it's harder.
No, so there's a culture. Yeah, I mean, is there a benefit to having sort of a localized, localized regional sort of approach to this, or is the other way better?
There's a real benefit because people feel in control. The more local you go, the more local control and ownership you inspire. But then we have to think about it, from the global customer's perspective. All the time, I think we have to take a step back and saying what we're doing today is great, but we've got to keep talking to our customers to see where they're going. What are they expecting in the future? Do they care about sustainability? Do we need to provide them with a better service?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Because that actually was a question I was going to ask before, but in terms of the vendor's responsibility, so it's having those open conversations, as you suggest there, not, be open about it and find out what does a vendor need to do to support these type of rollouts.
Yeah, I think all vendors really need to take stock. Whilst it's important that a vendor will want to keep all of its customers happy, we know that. At the end of the day, the customer will know who their gold card customers are, if I could call them that. The ones with the biggest spends, and the ones maybe that have really done the best job of using their products. It's probably understandable that the vendor would want to spend more time with those customers that are doing the best job, that have got they're likely to be leaders. And if you're a vendor, you've only got so much R&D money to invest in your product. And so you really need to be sure, don't you, that any future product development that you do is the right development, and that your customers that are likely to need this particular new development.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to sort of take us down a different track, and it's one that you're very passionate about, Derek. Sustainability, and really, it's about what technology's role in sustainability. So I think maybe some people, you might read about it, you might hear about sustainability all the time, but more specifically, from your career and your experience, about how technology can support, if I can say it, support sustainability goals.
Yeah, for me, I'm passionate about this because IT is one thing. Sustainability is the number one challenge for people, for companies, for the planet. Frankly, we all read what's going on in our world. We all need to do something, and this has been known for 30 years. And in that last 30 years, some of the smartest companies out there haven't need to be told that the humans are making a mess. What they've figured out is they need to do their bit by reducing waste. But there's something fascinating going on here, because this is not greenwashing, which we're talking about. This is a business opportunity. And green business is simple. Put it like this: companies that make stuff produce waste as a byproduct. It's just the way it is. If you reduce your waste, you reduce your operating costs. If you reduce your operating costs, you maximize your profit. And the CEO, he or she, knows that. And so I've got so many examples of companies out there that figured this out a long time ago and have become more profitable and have been able to introduce new products and services as a end result of doing what I've always called looking through a green lens on their operation. If you choose to step back and look through a green lens, you find all this waste that's going on, whether it's water, whether it's energy, whether it's raw materials. All waste is lost profit for your business, which is not what we all need. And so it's important to see that this green business opportunity is real. So technology can help, and technology is starting to help, I would say, from an IT point of view. Engineers, we talked about engineers earlier. Engineers don't need telling at all that waste equals bad. Waste is dangerous, even in many cases. So engineers have always gone out of their way to avoid waste and to automate the handling of waste, to get rid of it. But IT can help too. IT can help with tracking across the company. Where is the waste? What was the waste yesterday? And how efficient was the batch of chemicals we made yesterday for our top customer? And how much waste did we produce? All of this is business insight and helps run the business better. So IT can help do monitoring and tracking of what I would call the environmental footprint of a company. So you made 100 million profit, that's great. Okay, at the expense of how much waste and how much energy did it take out of our planet to produce that 100 million? And if we reduce that footprint, how much happier would everybody be, from shareholders to employees? I've found that employees don't need convincing on this. We just need to make sure business managers in a busy world understand the opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. So, and you're right. It's what you said before. It has to come from the top, and it has to come from them. The business leaders, prioritizing sort of sustainability, which you'd hope for in this sort of day and age we are now, would be sort of towards the top of the priority list. Yeah.
Yep. We're in agreement. I think a lot of people are in agreement. The question is, how much time have we got left before things become, from a planetary point of view, too difficult?
No, exactly. And we mentioned, obviously, I mean, we're focusing on technology here, but are there any sort of examples of technology or even use cases you could think of, Derek, that you could be applied to sort of sustainability? Quite a broad question, I know. But,
yeah. There's a I think there's a huge range of technologies out there, from monitoring to reporting, data analytics, and providing the right key performance indicators for the business. That's something IT's always been good at. And so also, where are the technologies that can help reduce our energy? We've seen a big migration of data centers from the world of IT into the world of cloud, of course, and that gives us scalability. Larger data centers run by the cloud vendors can be run more effectively. They've got deeper pockets to be able to use renewable energy and better cooling technologies, for example. All of that's possible, but I think we're only just starting to see what AI can do for us. What if AI could grab hold of cameras, technology, pictures, real-time pictures of all of the machines which your software is monitoring, could grab all of that data, which is vast, of course, and to correlate it with the machine performance and start to go predictive? Well, if you could do that, just think, if we could go predictive and make the machines so much more efficient, we can keep them on the point of least waste generation and make sure at the same time customers will get the best products coming out because the machines are being run properly. So we can do two things at once. We can optimize production for the customer, and we can optimize production to minimize waste and lower our environmental footprint at the same time. AI's a big subject, I know, but we're just at the threshold of what's going to be possible.
Yeah, I think predictive maintenance is often. I mean, we don't describe ourselves. Senseye doesn't describe itself as a sustainability tool, but it just happens to be one of the outcomes. I mean, often it's we're talking about reducing downtime and increasing productivity of maintenance stuff, but sustainability is quite an important one, because it's, even if you can save on both saving money on sort of spare parts, but you can also keep a good stock and plan your stock holdings, instead of having to expedite emergency delivery from the other side of the world. Need this part now because the machine's down. So I think there's so much more under the surface for predictive maintenance. But I think the idea is we're not promoting it as a sustainability tool, but I think there's a lot that it can do in that area that's often not talked about as much.
Yeah. So could I just ask, with your current technology, before we look at the world of AI, presumably your predictive analytics is already doing a good job of helping to keep what we just talked about, the factory running as smoothly as possible and minimizing the maintenance costs.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, on the sustainability side, it's sort of keeping machines running for longer, extending their life. So you're not, you know, it's not removing machines and changing machines, 'cause obviously that has an impact as well. Helping them to run more efficiently, so using less energy. Yeah, so I think that there's so much in that area, but yeah, beyond the use cases of helping teams be more productive, in terms of where they focus their attention and that side of things. But are there other sort of examples of technology you can see really being key in this area, sort of sustainability or driving positive outcomes?
I think it's when we start integrating 3D images of products and machinery that we're going to start to see an explosion in data, but also in real time be able to monitor the product quality, the amount of waste being generated. We'll be able to keep a watching eye directly, as well as the actual machinery and plants will be able to keep a watching eye. But as long as AI can do a good job of managing all that data for us, and as long as the AI technology is reliable, we talked about reliability and maturity of the software earlier. The question is, when is the right time to dive in, isn't it? I think most companies would realise you can't just dive in wholesale unless you're doing some form of digital transformation, and you have to. I think most CIOs and CEOs would encourage a learning curve approach and would want to be a little bit skeptical about new technology like this and be able to get early proof points and evidence that the claims of its power are actually real.
I just wrote down a phrase you just mentioned there about explosion of data, and I thought it was an interesting way to put it, because I think there is so much data out there, and maybe like Industry 4.0 sort of taught companies to collect lots of data, and then they get to a point where it's like, well, what do I do with this data to get the insights? And obviously, I guess now AI is a solution to that. But do you see things the same way, like over course of a number of years, where sort of IoT data collections become a thing, and then there's this sort of confusion about now what do we do with it? We've got so much data now. It's like, what do we do with it to actually drive business results, positive business results?
That's a really good question, and I think what's going on here is very applicable to AI, starting to have the potential to massage all of this data for us. But there's one big insight that I took away from Gartner. You may have lots and lots of data, but is it all good data? Is it all accurate? And in the world of ERP, you can get into trouble pretty quickly if your master data about your products, your customers, and your suppliers, which is surprisingly complex. You need to be able to maintain that data because it's key data within the database. Everything relates back to your master data. And if your master data is not accurate, it's not clean, it's not full of duplicates, which is very often what ends up happening, then you can have a real problem. And I think this is true of big data. Big data was the buzzword a couple of years ago. Okay, what big data suggested was that the infrastructure, the hardware, our computers, if you like, had the power and the memory to be able to manipulate vast amounts of data. Well, that was true, but as we've said, lots and lots of data is one thing, but you need to make sure that you've got really clean data, accurate data, because it's like the foundations of the house, isn't it? You can't make any form of extrapolation or really valuable judgment based on that data if it's wrong, or if it's a little bit wrong. What happens if it's a little bit wrong? Well, you might be lucky. That's not going to fly, is it? I think it's clear that big data taught us the lesson that lots of data is one thing, but clean data, especially our all-important master data, is vital. And the only way you get clean data is by having good enterprise architects on the case, and having people that are motivated to collect data in the right way and to prevent errors creeping in.
And I mean, clearly from our point of view, like, predictive maintenance point of view, data's a key thing. But the other thing we look at as well is actually the knowledge of in this case, maintenance teams themselves. And it all leads on to another question, actually, I guess, about the changing workforce and where AI sort of plays into that. And the way we sort of position it is there's a lot of knowledge leaving businesses, so they're either retiring or changing jobs more regularly if it's a newer generation. But so data's one thing, but what how can AI sort of supplement or help fill the gap where sort of knowledge is leaving businesses? Skills and knowledge is leaving a manufacturing business.
No, that's a brilliant question. Do you know what? I spent probably 15 years at Gartner worrying about that in the application to SAP customers, because I kept getting phone calls from these customers saying, Derek, you've got to help. We've lost our top 3 SAP experts. We don't know why. They've gone off. They've gone elsewhere. How do we prevent this? Because we're going to run out of knowledge. We won't be able to manage these large, highly complex SAP systems if all our best people are leaving. So you're right. If you can have the best tools out there, you can have the right approach, but to really use them properly, you need experts. Now, you can either have the philosophy, well, we're not in the world of IT. We'll buy in some service providers, some consultants. They claim to be expert. Well, you could, but be careful. It might work, but you're probably going to lose control. For a key technology like AI, you need to have your arms around it. You need your own knowledge workers, your own experts that have gone through these early learning pilot projects. And in the world of SAP, I came up with a model called the SAP Centre of Excellence. It was about knowledge retention within the customer. And it basically said, if we have the CEO saying, this is our long-term business strategy, look, ERP is going to be with us for 20 years. We need to recognise we've spent millions and millions on it. The only way we'll get our return on investment is if we can retain this knowledge. So we'll form an internal team. Doesn't have to be big, but it's the right people that are motivated. They're recognised and rewarded, which comes back to how good is your company at managing people, because it's not just a money thing. Money's part of it, but how you manage and motivate people and give them the recognition of what a wonderful job they've done. All of that will make them feel they want to be part of this new centre of excellence, whether it's a SAP centre of excellence, an engineering maintenance COE, or an AI centre of excellence. If these core technologies are so key, we should be thinking about knowledge retention and having a centre within the company which contains, back to where we started, both business people and engineers working together on the same technology to make the company as successful as possible.
And what I thought was particularly interesting there, you talked about sort of individuals and how you can sort of encourage individuals to stay. And like you say, money is only part of the story. But an interesting thing I found with Senseye over the years is we've actually got individuals within our customers who've actually sort of their careers progressed within the company. I won't claim it to be just because of Senseye, because that might be a bit too much, but it certainly played a key role. So it just shows that actually technology can also play a part of that. Is a key part of that story. If you find the right technology and you've bought into it and you're utilising it in all the right ways, which we've sort of discussed today, then there's really big potential there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's right, because if we work with the right people that have got the right skills, they've got the right commitment, and they've got the right motivation, using your tools, you're basically transforming the CVs of these individuals. They become extremely valuable because they've got sharp end experience of the possible. So I'm with you there. I think that we can build heroes within these companies because they will then be able to do an even better job of showing what's the art of the possible. And we're talking about the practical as well as the possible. We can always say AI can do something in particular, but if you've got experienced people say, well, it can, but here's what we found on our pilot project last month. We can do that, but surprisingly, we found X, Y, and Z, and we're going to do things differently because of X, Y, and Z.
It's interesting, but you mentioned like champion. I mean, we actually call certain individuals sort of PDM champions, but the people who are driving the adoption and across the business. So ultimately, it's with being an enterprise sort of tool. But that sort of role is so important. And again, there's the risk there that the risk they get promoted, which is great for them, and a good reflection on the work from Siemens. But it also leaves a gap there that needs to be filled. But if you've got what you've described, that knowledge, centre of excellence, which can be applied to SAP or ERP or predictive maintenance, whatever the centre of excellence is, but if you've got that in place, there's a continuity around it, isn't it? And that's how it should be in a business. It shouldn't be one person leaves and everything. And I'm sure it isn't at companies of that size, because that'd be madness, really. But yeah, that's why that was interesting.
Yep. It's exactly that. I think you could apply this centre of excellence model to really strategically important technologies, but fundamentally those which you think are going to be long lasting. You wouldn't want to do it for something which is a short term opportunity, but for longer lasting, game changing technologies. They're the ones where we need to do things a bit differently and recognise the importance and get geared up for the long term.
Absolutely, you agree. But yeah, so God, we've covered a lot, and the time has flown by. It's almost like we're taking our normal conversations, Derek, and just putting it and being recorded instead. Like I said earlier, it'd be nice to have a pint in hand, so maybe we'll do that again some other time. But a bit early as well, actually, from where we are at the moment. But I guess I sort of want to tie all this together. We usually do this at the end of an episode. We sort of some key takeaways and for people to think. But we've covered so much today. It's quite difficult to bring that in. But to finish on a note, like, where do you think we're heading? What should companies or organisations be focusing on in the next? Well, I'm not going to say it's the typical crystal ball question, but today, as we are today, what should companies be thinking of as they're adopting technology, again, especially across the enterprise? What sort of takeaways can you sort of provide?
Well, I'd say there's a few things going on here that I think we're just at the threshold of opportunities, and technology is going to make an even bigger difference. That's just the Darwinian nature of technology. It comes along, and it's coming along faster, as we've said. So what can you do? I think you have to stop and think, do we want to be a leader or do we want to be a follower? Not everybody wants to be a leader, which is okay. But for most companies, they will say, well, we don't want to be left behind. So that means, I think, if we're looking at some of the things we've talked about in the session so far, is you've got to make sure that the CEO's on board and the board are behind you if you really want to do things differently. Sounds obvious, but it doesn't always happen. In a more complex world where IT is really what we're talking about, you need to have enterprise architects. You need to stop and think, how good are we at managing change? Do we need to get better at managing change? As we said earlier, managing change is not an easy thing to do. That may be something where consultants could help you. Then should we invest in these centres of excellence in the right places if our organisation is of the right size? Do we need centres of excellence? What sort of people would be best placed to be in these key positions of enterprise architect? centre of excellence leaders, because they will make a huge difference, because got the right people that are open-minded and respected within the organisation. That's important, isn't it? And practical. Then you can pretty well achieve great things, and you'll be. I think those are some of the basics. And once you've got the basics in place, you can be geared up for new technology as it comes along, and hopefully do a better job of adopting it faster than your competition.
Very well summarised. It's like you've done. But yeah, I couldn't put it sort of better myself. I think that's some really good takeaways for everyone as well. But yeah, I guess for today, I say for today because I'll find an excuse to invite you back, Derek, at some point. I think it's been really fascinating for me. But like I said, it's just bringing our offline conversations to life in some ways. But thank you again for taking the time, sharing your vast experience and knowledge. It's really, really cool stuff. What I'll suggest is if people want to know or find out a little bit more about Derek or follow, so you're still reasonably active on LinkedIn in the sense you've still got
on LinkedIn.
a profile and you post on there. Yeah,
sure. Great to talk to people on LinkedIn. No problem. It's great talking to you, Noel. I really enjoyed that conversation.
No, it's great. Well, we've been telling you to retire for years, but you still refuse to. So you can still reach out to Derek if you've got any questions around this topic. So he's still very much, his head is in the game, as it were, and still a very, as you can tell from today, hopefully a very interesting person to talk to about this. So yeah, but for today, thank you, Derek, and thank you everyone out there for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.